about our desire of reaching our goals and going to the NBA or going to the NFL, and we spend our time as a young kid, 15, 16, 17 years old, training our butts off in order to reach these set goals and merge ourselves in these environments with grown men. The strain that we put on our bodies, the stress that we put on ourselves, all of this stuff accumulates and adds up and creates great anxiety. What is the gain out of it if we fail? Even if you do make it to the NBA, when that career is over, what is it that you have to fall back on? Where is your career going to go? My dream was to make it to the NBA, and I have played professional basketball, or at least trained with professional basketball teams. But I sat back and thought to myself, what else is my thought? What else? What else am I going to continue pursuing? What else am I going to do with my life? I don't feel fulfilled. And I don't think I ever will feel fulfilled chasing this dream. So what I want to talk about is the fall of an athlete. The times where you're 24, 25, 26 years old and your time in the NBA is up. Your career is over. What now? Where do I fall back? And let's talk about the number of athletes who aren't self-sufficient for themselves, and they end up working back in these corporate jobs, and they go back and start working these 9-to-5 jobs and businesses. These are the likelihoods of athletes, and this is what most athletes likely do when their career is over, whether they make it or whether they fail. This video is going to break down certain things that you need to keep in mind while trying to progress as an athlete, as a hooper, or even as a football player, or whatever type of sport that you get into. So what you should be trying to do as an athlete is carve out yourself. You'd be trying to create a brand or a business. What you need to do is take from the resource that you have in your environment, which would be your skill set, whether it be as a basketball player or as a football player or as a boxer. And you should be trying to carve yourself and market yourself in a way that suits you. There are many aspects that come to marketing. One is what you want yourself to be perceived as. And what you want yourself to be perceived as should be your inner self. It should be your artistic self, your sophisticated self. Many times as an athlete, especially us NBA players and our football players, us as athletes in general try so hard to make it to these adult, older environments, say the NBA, for example, or the NFL, for example. We're training a 22-year-old body or a 21-year-old body like a 27-year-old body. When we need to start having this reality check that this 22-year-old body or 21-year-old body isn't the same as this 27-year-old body. So the weights that we're lifting and with the energy that we're enforcing with these weights are not normal to our body, and this is actually straining and is actually crazy to our body, and it's affecting our mind. So what I want to talk about is the fact that how us athletes, we tend to focus so much on the physical side of ourselves. We never really focus on developing the muscles in the mind and really trying to carve out the other aspects of us that create our full game. Say, as a basketball player, I'm very creative in the ways in which I get to the basket, or how I use the hezzy, the stop and go, all these different little key detailed factors into carving out my skill set in my sport. These aspects of me mentally can be transitioned to how I approach things like business. In creating a business, I use the same skills or the same detailed creativity that I use when I'm carving out my basketball game in the same aspects of when I'm creating a business in terms of learning about bookkeeping or how I carve out my financial statement and statement of cash flows and balance sheets, things like this, right? And when we come up with these ideas for our businesses, for example, say you had a business that was a clothing business, and this clothing business was to promote a certain message, right? How are you going to market this clothing business, right? So if you were to just learn about the clothing business in the regular sense, it would just be like, okay, so now I have to do all this legal stuff, and I have to make sure that I have my operating agreement and I have all of my legal papers and a business plan. So when you come up with this business plan, is it going to be a business plan that's set up in black and white, or are you going to use the skill set that you've acquired as playing as being a basketball player in order to carve out the creative side of you, right? So this would be art, right? Because in a sense, what a clothing business does is, or especially a brand, is it takes a message and it takes art and it takes creativity and it pushes a certain narrative or a certain narrative, right? So this is just an example of what we can do and what we can be looking into in terms of how we really carve out ourselves. So when you look at this as an athlete, as a basketball player, all this stuff comes from the original mindset and the original structure of how I structured my life in the form of basketball, right? As a basketball player, I understand that I have a duty to my image and what I promote and the messages that I promote. This is the other side or the deeper side of basketball or being an athlete that we don't really pay too much mind to. We're just so focused on us on the big stage and us just carving out or just being a basketball player and working on our skill set and the details of our skill set. Now, ain't nothing wrong with that, but sometimes what we fail to realize is when we get too boggled down in playing basketball or working on our skill set, there's other aspects of life or other aspects of ourselves that we're not properly enhancing. So it's almost like a bodybuilder where he's working too much on his upper body and he's not putting nothing on his legs, or he's not strengthening his legs, so he's easily knocked over. As athletes, we got to reassess ourselves and start focusing on these other aspects of ourselves that may be not publicized in the media or that you may not see of other athletes. For example, you really don't see too much of other athletes really mentally working on themselves. Like, how are they educated? Are they educated on their history? Are they educated on the science? Are they educated on what's going on around them in the world and things like that, right? Because if they knew these other things, it would make it much more easy for them to be able to carve out their careers. Because basketball, as I said before, has a window. Basketball is a window. There's going to be a point in time where you're not going to be able to hoop no more, and you ain't going to have no choice but to fall back on whatever else it is that you crafted. So, in my case, it's going to be how I'm falling back on my business, and how I'm getting into art and creativity. This is the other aspect of myself that I need to reinforce and I need to build. Balance, mental matters, education, things like this is what's making me complete and making me someone who's able to carve out my own career and not have to worry about or fall back on or rely on the input of others. What that means is, say that you're an athlete and you have all of these different types of advisors, financial advisors and things like this. Financial advisors may not always necessarily give you the benefit of what it is that you want, but they're going to look out for themselves and what's in their best interest and what can keep you confined and constrained into paying a certain amount of money or owing them a certain amount of money for a long period of time. So it's important that we understand and know the business, and that we know economics, and that we know our history as well. Knowing this stuff is what helps us make informed decisions. So when we get into these situations, as athletes, that the situation that we get into and the careers that we want to pursue, we can make better informed decisions the more we're educated on our environment and our surroundings and the situations that and businesses that we're getting into. So as an athlete right now, if I was 15, 16, 17 years old and I'm working as hard as I can to make this basketball team, right? As maybe a freshman, I want to be on the varsity team, or maybe I am that varsity guy and I'm trying to get them scouts looking at me. What I'm also trying to do as well is develop my mind too. I'm going to I should be at this age trying to carve out a business plan for myself. And the easiest thing you can do at that age, I want to say, is to get with your friend group and create an organization. Whether it be an organization where that you just be online and say you just looking for likes and views or as entertainers, or whether you are starting a clothing business, which would be the default thing. If you were starting a clothing business, you and your little friend group would just have to assign yourself simple roles. And within these simple roles, then this is where you guys start to carve out the blueprints of your business. And once you have these things carved out, even if you don't make any money off the rip, you still have established a foundation of a business and have established a position for yourself to be able to make money or do business in due time. Say like when you go off to college, and once you go off to college, you meet all these other different people who are getting into different aspects of themselves. They're photographers. You see people learning about photography. You got people learning about digital marketing. You got people learning about all these different types of things. So when you meet these people, you can do business with them and have them ask for help from them. Because maybe they got assignments or projects that they need to do, and your business that you have could actually be good for them to pass the class that they need. So it's all of these connections that you get from college, right? If you establish a business in high school, then when you get to college, you now have you now have connections. So if I was a teenager right now, I'd be creating a business. The default thing is a clothing business, but it could be anything. Whatever you feel comfortable doing and whatever that suits you. If you are an artist, obviously I'm sure you want to get your art out there, so a clothing business would be one of the things that you would do. But maybe you wouldn't want to be a clothing business, start a clothing business. Maybe you would want to do something else. See, it's a matter of making time, right? Because as a high schooler, you really don't have time as a student athlete. When we're student athletes, of course, you already know how school is and the curriculums. But at the same time, we also know that after school we have to train and we got practice. And most kids, me being one of them, I couldn't even keep up with school and being an athlete at the same time, right? So I know how that is. But with the position that you're in, there's no way that you can just specifically carve out yourself as a basketball player and not establish blueprints for your career. It's just a matter of creating balance and setting aside a little bit of time in order to establish these blueprints. What is it that you really dream of being? Once you are educated on business and you know all the concepts of what it takes to run a business or become an entrepreneur, you can then really reassess and reestablish what those dreams that you have are and fit it into the context of what an entrepreneur is. Start carving out those blueprints in high school. This doesn't mean taking time off from being a basketball player or being time off from school. No, this just means setting aside a certain season in order to really establish these foundational blueprints. All right? Say during the off season, you got plenty of time on your hands. All you're doing is schoolwork. During the off season, you should be carving out the foundations of what it is that you want your business to be and start chasing those dreams. During the season, you should be all hands on deck in whatever it is that you put your work to or your hands to. Balancing yourself this way wax on, wax off, eventually in due time is what's going to allow you to create something much bigger. It's about exploring your environment and learning new things and educating yourself on different aspects of different things. I know for me, I had to start with history. History was the one thing that I was really curious about in terms of our environment, like the way in which we're living, why are we living this way, and why is America the way it is today. With this curiosity, I dug deeper and I started to learn more and more and more about history, which is what led me into other aspects of learning and education, which eventually led me to entrepreneurship and business. You can do this too as athletes. I personally feel like athletes can do this better than anybody else when it comes to transitioning themselves and to building themselves up mentally, because it's just like how we did when we was building ourselves up physically to play the physical sport. When we talk about the many aspects of ourselves that we neglect to go after because we're so captivated by our sport of basketball or football or whatever that sport may be, these other aspects of ourselves start to diminish, like our imagination and our minds, our creativity, our artistry. So we have to balance this out, and we have to start training and building up these fields and carving out these fields of ourselves. There's more to us than just basketball. We have a curiosity about the world and our environment and what's around us. So educating ourselves on this environment is what can bring us peace mentally, and what's also going to give us the direction in how we carve out our careers. When I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I had a very huge curiosity of just history. I just wanted to know what was really going down in like the 60s and the 70s and stuff. But I never really looked into that. And to be honest, my mind started to just falter. And I mentally started to get depressed. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And I would just cover it up with just basketball and just grinding out. But I never really knew what this mental depression and anxiety came from. What it really came from was me working too hard on the basketball end and not working enough on the mind, the mental end. So it's a balance. Like I said before, you have to be able to strengthen all aspects of yourself, mentally and physically and spiritually. So this is what caused me to falter in those early stages, but it was when I started to really educate myself on Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and all these other types of people throughout history, and what the Civil War and Reconstruction was really about, and what the 60s and the civil rights or human rights movement was really about. And of course the 70s and 80s and the crack epidemic and all of this type of stuff that created and made what we see in America today of our culture. So this is what gave me a sense of peace in knowing what happened back then, and this is also what gives me a heads up into things that I see in today's society, and it gives me a level of awareness to know what's happening and know what's about to happen in terms of today's society. I look at some of the things I see now in terms of our culture, and it seems like we're getting pushed an agenda of socially engineered culture, a culture of sex, money, and drugs. But I can also refer back to history that in the 80s, due to the crack epidemic, it changed our culture from a culture of evolution to a culture of sex, money, and drugs. So I made that connection due to me doing some research and going back in history and finding that out. And also, I can look back at the black code from Reconstruction, and I can tie that back into today's society in terms of how in the South, especially the slave states, how the dollar stopped circulating from in our community in the 70s due to integration. And now as people, especially in these areas down here, we work for white corporate businesses and we pay them money. The money that would originally go back to us, invested back into our communities, is now going into these white communities because now we're living within their housing because of our lack of equity. This is what's causing us to not be able to attain any wealth, and what's causing us to not be able to attain any type of accumulative assets in order to be able to invest back into our communities, our health programs, educational programs, youth programs, and all these different other types of things that actually help build our communities specifically. We no longer have these things, and it ties directly back into our wealth situation. We're about one of the lowest communities in possession of wealth, if not the lowest community of wealth. And we're also the second or third highest population of people in America. We have to be able to navigate our way through all this corruption and the things that we find ourselves in. Because as athletes, when we find ourselves doing business, it's easy for us not understanding what the business side of things is really all about. But when we really look at the business side of the things, these people really aren't making all this money. And it's like when the career is over, they don't have any more money left because they didn't understand the business. So now the rummage is looking for a way to make money or a way to find a career now that their career is over. So we got to make sure we're making the right decisions. This way we don't fall into no traps, because as athletes it's easy for us to fall down these traps just by simply not knowing. We want to get into all these big business deals and do all these big business things and know absolutely nothing about business. So, man, that's going to conclude this little video right here, though, man. But expect more.